Currently, I wear 3 different hats professionally. In one life, I am a council advisor to a county councilman in Salt Lake County. I work with Salt Lake County Councilman Jim Bradley. In another role, I'm a district administrator for a small local district in Salt Lake County. It's called the Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Service Area. You may have heard of us. We assess the police fee. It was so popular that the state legislature took away the ability of local districts to assess a police fee. So my motto is, if you want something killed, let me implement it. It's a surefire way that it goes away. And then I have a third role where I serve as a private consultant. I have a budget consultancy. I have a special knack in that role where I've figured out how to help territories and island nations work on budget things, especially in the month of January. So I get to get out of here and go to warm places and help them out in January. So it's with the middle hat as a district administrator that I'm going to talk to you for a couple of minutes today about special assessment areas, local districts, and interlocal entities. And I need to tell you, I am the B team. The A team is Carl Hendrickson. And Carl was unable to be here today, but Carl and I have worked together a lot on local districts and interlocal government entities. Specifically, Carl is the Chief Legal Counsel for the Salt Lake Valley Fire Service Area and the Unified Fire Department. He also serves as my legal counsel at the Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Service Area. He's a former district attorney colleague of Gavin Anderson's, and after listening to Gavin, I'm sure you can appreciate the juice in that Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office, and please feel free to take Gavin up on his offer to answer any questions that you may have. And then finally, where I got to know Carl the best and know of his keen intellect was when he was serving as the legal counsel to the Salt Lake County Council, and I am still serving as staff to a councilman. So Carl asked me if I would come and talk to you for just a few minutes about local assessment areas, local districts, and finally interlocal government entities. I know that not a lot of the rural counties use the local assessment area tool, but basically it's a tool within the code where you can go in and you can set a designated area so that you can tax the people who are actually receiving the service for a specific service that they're receiving. For example, you could do street projects. You could do specific sidewalk projects. You could do lighting. Some will do it for water or sewer. We're working with one in the unincorporated Salt Lake County area right now where we have High Country Estates, which is an unincorporated county area. They have their own water system there, and they need some help in trying to put together an assessment area so that they can get some additional water capacity. They actually drain through all of their water quite often in the summer, and it's becoming a fire hazard. And so we're exploring, and I know Alan Westenkow from Zions is coming up next. With Zions, we're exploring the possibility of putting together a special assessment area. A lot of communities will look at this because you can hone in on a specific area and you only assess the people right within that area for the services that are being provided so that the entire community doesn't have to pay for it. In some neighborhoods or some communities you might drive through and you'll see some special street lights that look maybe historic. They look a little different than the street lights that are in most communities. That's most often a special assessment area where the people have come to their government and they've said, you know, will you draw a border around us and tax us separately so that we can have this amenity? Now, I will tell you from my public policy perspective, I think that we need to be a little bit careful about using those areas. For example, I live in a more urban environment and in more urban communities, and I would hate to see us get to a place where general taxation doesn't provide, say, basic street lighting services, but rather communities that are more wealthy and want to pay for street lights get them, and other communities don't get them because citizens are unwilling to have the additional tax. So there's a little bit of a catch-22, and you need to be careful when you use the special assessment area. It is subject to protest. And so it's not that just because, you know, somebody comes up with the idea to do it, that the lawmakers create it and it goes into place. We go through a very formal public protest process, and people can protest out of the special assessment area. And I just saw my good friend John Bronson walk in. I gave the High Country Estates example. We may pull that off one day for those folks as a special assessment area. Let me flip then quickly to local districts. I know usually a lot of you use local districts to fund recreation, roads, health. You may have that in your community. We're doing something a little bit different right now in Salt Lake County with local districts. In our highly urbanized county, where we have 16 different municipalities, we're actually using local districts in concert with interlocal entities, which I'll talk about in just a minute, to regionalize some services. The two big examples that I will use are our Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Service Area and the Fire Service Area. And the way that these are structured is we have certain communities who came together in the district. We have the unincorporated county, and then we have member cities. So they all then become one taxing area, so that the county council doesn't per se have the tax authority over that area, but rather a local district board has the tax authority. Let me just dash through here to where we are now. The county council doesn't have the authority, but the local district board does have the authority. And so, like I said, the local district can include many cities, it can include no cities. When we started the Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Service Area, it was only unincorporated county. Since then, the cities of Harriman and Riverton have annexed into the district. Now, when we get talking in just a minute about an interlocal entity, which is the department, it's much broader. But at least within this district, what the people in the district have said is we want to have a unique way to pay for the services, and we want to have that all assessed by the district. And so, interestingly enough, a district can also extend across county boundaries. And in our Salt Lake Valley Fire Service Area, they have now dipped into Utah County, and they're providing services to some communities on it would be the north end of Utah County that are now part of that fire service area. So on the governance, as I mentioned before, it could be the county governing body, or it could be like on our two boards, the two local districts that we have in place, we have county officials and we have city officials who represent the municipalities that are within the service area as well. We are contemplating creating another local district this year in Salt Lake County, and that will be a public works district. And it, again, similarly, will have municipal officials from the different cities that are working with the district and want to have their funding that way. There's also an opportunity that if the district board is created by a commission or by a county council, they can set up what that board of trustees is to start with. And one of those examples would be our Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling District. That district is operating, it provides local garbage collection services for many of the municipalities throughout Salt Lake County, as well as the unincorporated county area. And it kind of went through an evolution. It was interesting. It started out that the county council controlled that district and the board and would set the budget. And then by ordinance, they created an administrative control board. And on that administrative control board, they seated elected officials from different municipalities. So they became really the drivers of the district, and now they've taken it a little step further where they've separated a little bit, and they are solely responsible at this point in time, that control board is for the district. The future of that district is a little bit uncertain, only because of what we may decide to do with the public works district and whether or not we try to wrap that administrative control group from the sanitation district in. These are some of the authorized uses. As I mentioned, I know a lot of you use local districts for recreation, for maybe some of your utilities, for hospitals. But here's the laundry list of everything that you can use a local district for under state law. And then these are just some of the different ways that you can have the district created. It can be by a resolution of the governing body. It can be a petition of the residents. And you can see on down there the ways you can do it. The funding for local districts. It either comes from property tax or it comes from user fees. And as I mentioned, with the Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Service area, we are the only district in the state of Utah that is prohibited from charging user fees. So if you don't want them, have me implement them. We'll get rid of them for you. But Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling, on the contrary, has no property tax. Their sole source of revenue is user fees. Those who use the service pay for the service. So let me ask you a question. Why might you want a user fee instead of a tax? Anyone?
So you get reelected.
Okay. Well, I will tell you, running a county councilman for re-election after implementing the police fee was a challenge, but he won anyway. But one of the big reasons why you may look for a user fee instead of a property tax is oftentimes your service user is very different from who your property tax payer is. Specifically, you can broaden the base because a lot of times you can have tax-exempt entities, churches, schools, other people who use the service are subject to a use fee. They're not necessarily, well, they're not subject to a tax. And quite frankly, when we were doing the law enforcement, that was the policy reason we were looking for a user fee was so that we could try to broaden the base of those who were paying for local law enforcement so that we could get people who use the service to help pay for it. Interlocal entities. So we've talked about the districts, and I'm going to go back again to kind of the example of the interlocal entities that we use in Salt Lake County, knowing that many of you use interlocal entities to provide other services. For example, I know in a lot of our counties, you'll sign an interlocal entity with another county simply because they have the capacity to provide a service you don't. Maybe snow removal, something like that. So basically, two different governmental entities can join together in an interlocal entity to provide service that either one of them is statutorily able to provide. Okay? So what we've done in Salt Lake County is we've joined together as interlocal entities and created, and it's a different government, it's a different governing body, separate and apart, again, from your commission or your council. And they sit as a board and they have budget authority. They do not have tax authority. And we'll get to how these interlocal entities are funded in just a moment. But they are a separate legal entity, and we've created them for police and fire. Now, where we have a district in both of those different venues, the district sits in the interlocal entity as a partner. So the district itself, the funding district, sits on the interlocal entity department board, the elected officials who are on the district board. Does that make sense? And then when we look at the district, the ways that the interlocal entity, the way it gets its money is it charges fees for services, or there can be member assessments, we call them dues. They can do sales of services, but they do not have, in an interlocal entity, any property tax authority. So let me give you the example of how the Unified Police Department works in Salt Lake County. We have the district, and the district assesses a property tax, and that property tax funds the Unified Police Department bill for all of the citizens within the district. The district is unincorporated Salt Lake County, Harriman, and Riverton. So they pay a property tax in those communities. That property tax goes 100% to the Unified Police Department. The district passes that money through as a member assessment because they're a member of that interlocal entity. Now let's talk about the cities of Midville and Holiday. They are both in the Unified Police Department. They are not in the district. So they do not have their citizens assessed the property tax that the district assesses. Rather, they look within their municipality at the different funding streams that they have: sales tax, property tax, franchise tax. I know you in counties, we don't get franchise tax, but cities do. So they look at all of those different sources of revenue, and that is how they pay their member assessment to the Unified Police Department, which is the interlocal entity. So it's really, the Interlocal Entity Act really does allow you to come together with other governing bodies to do the public's business, if it makes more sense for you to do it that way rather than doing it on your own. We've already talked through that. Completely separate. So what we say in Salt Lake County with the way that we're using local districts and the interlocal entities, we're able to provide big time departments with a small town feel. And that's what the citizens like. There is some local control. Local officials still get to make the decisions, but they get to come together and have a department that has highly sophisticated detective units, highly sophisticated investigative units, and it's working very well for us. And I know in many of your communities you're using the same kind of a model for your road work or for your snow plowing or different things that you do, where you can come together and achieve those economies of scale but still be able to have some local control. So that was a lot. It was like a fire hose. I don't think I told them how to make the clock. I think I told them what time it was. That's what I always get told. Tell us the time, not how to build the clock. Do you have any questions?